Hello, I'm Nora, and welcome back to Novels with Nora. It is finally time for my vampire reading vlog. I have been talking about this vlog all year, it feels like, and it is finally time for me to sit down and read these vampire books. So before we get into the actual vlog, and what I know you're here to see, which is me reading the books with vampires, I want to talk a little bit about my history with vampires. Because I never thought that I liked vampires. I always thought, and still do, think that I prefer werewolves over vampires, but I have also recently stumbled across a few pieces of vampire media that have made me start to question my stance on vampires and think that maybe I just have been going about things all wrong and not consuming the vampire media that I think works for me and is something I'm interested in. Because especially growing up, like the only real vampire media I was exposed to was like Twilight, and that was not something I was ever really super interested in. Love triangles weren't my thing, didn't really care, and I also always preferred werewolves. So vampires just weren't something that I cared about, especially when if werewolves were involved, they were being looked over in favor of the vampires. So this all started to change a few months ago when I read Lucy Undying by Kiersten White and absolutely loved it. And this is a Dracula novel. This is based on the story of Dracula and Dracula's bride, Lucy Westenra, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the way the vampires were done. I loved the story. I loved everything about the vampire elements of this novel. And I started to question, maybe I do like vampires and I just never really gave myself a chance to find that out on my own. And from Twilight was just like, no, that's not for me. But there's so many other vampire medias out there and so many other depictions of vampires that I think really might work for me. And in thinking that, I realized that a lot of books that I have on my shelves feature very heavily vampires. So in this vlog, I'm going to be exploring the vampire genre and seeing if it's really not for me or if I've just been prejudiced against the vampires. This is the stack of unread vampire books on my shelves. And this is quite a few. And even in looking this, it's like, okay, so clearly these books and their plots stood out to me enough to make me want to purchase them. And considering that they all feature vampires very heavily, clearly there's something going on here. But this all started when I heard of this little novella here, Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. And this actually came out before Dracula and was one of the inspirations for Dracula. However, this novella features two sapphic or queer female main characters, and I was always really interested in that. But I had also heard that he kind of demonized the queerness of these two women and kind of used it to like make the point of like the evil seductress vampire. However, this edition specifically is edited by Carmen Maria Machado to kind of give some historical context and like shine some light and some more queer history to this novella. And so I'm really excited to read this. And I specifically sought out this edition to have that historical context. And I'm really, really excited for this because this is like one of the original vampire novels. So I will be reading this in this vlog to see kind of where it all started and what's going on here, especially in like a queer context like this. However, from there, I also found the novel Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, which is a retelling of Carmilla with like more heavily queer, not even subtext at this point. Like this is a very queer novel. It says, a compulsive feminist reworking of Carmilla, the queer novella that inspired Dracula. And I'm so excited for this. When this was announced, I was so enraptured by it, especially for someone who claimed to not like vampires. I was really into this, and I think it more had to do with the setting and the queerness of this novel. So I'm curious to read these two together and see how faithful of a retelling it is or how much more queerness it adds, because I imagine this, from what I've heard, is queer, but kind of in like a demonizing way of queerness. So I'm very excited to read these two together and see kind of what's going on here, especially because what I really want from these, especially this, given the time period that it was written, I want like the gothic imagery and like the setting and just like very immersive is what I want these to be. So I definitely will be reading these two in this vlog because this is kind of where this all started. However, I also have 4 other vampire novels that I'm very excited about. I won't get to all of them in this vlog, but I do have 4 other things that I can try my hand at. So first I have This Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings, and this is sapphic vampires again, set in 1920s, and I love the time period of the 1920s, like the Roaring 20s, and just like the imagery of it, and this especially from a woman of color writing that time period. I'm very interested in this, and this is a bit of a lengthier novel, and I believe this one's a duology, so very curious to see what's going on here. One thing that I really love about vampire stories is that they're so timeless because vampires are immortal. You can write them in any time period, and I think that this would be really fun for that aspect. And then next I have Silver Under Nightfall by Rincha Pecco, and this is like a high fantasy, adult fantasy vampire novel, so I'm very curious about this. I know that this one has to do with vampire hunters, so this could also be really interesting, especially seeing vampires in a more fantasy setting rather than in a like fictionalized or historical real world setting. So this is also a very interesting new-ish take on the vampire genre. And then the last two vampire novels I have here are kind of like classics in the vampire space, I feel, especially Diary of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This, I believe, is... I've heard a lot about this one, but never like actually read the synopsis of it, and I kind of want to keep it that way. This, from what I know, follows the wives or brides of Dracula and kind of like seeing what goes on with them, which also I feel like might have a little bit of queerness to it, so very excited about this. I do believe that this one is more just like a character study and a character exploration rather than having like a super heavy plot. And I also believe that that is the case with Woman Eating by Claire Coda, because this one I know follows her and just like her hunger, her immense unquenchable hunger. So this one is definitely going to be a character-driven novel, but I think it's also the shortest other than Carmilla of my options. So those are all of the vampire novels that I own, minus one that I have already read, and that is Court of the Undying Seasons by A.M. Strickland, because they are one of my favorite YA authors, and when they announced this, I was like, okay, an interesting take on vampires. And this is very interesting because it did something with vampires that I'd never seen done before, and I really enjoyed it. So I think that from this and from reading Lucy Undying, and then from hopefully reading some of these things, what I'm going to learn about myself is that I do like vampires, just in very specific ways. And I think that a lot of that has to do with, again, when I think of vampires, I'm picturing like the Twilight vampires and like the hot, sexy, mysterious, but like I kind of want to read them in a more emotional setting. And so I think a lot of the things that I have here are going to do that. So I will read some of these things, definitely Carmilla and Hungerstone, and then maybe one more for this vlog, because I do think I'm going to make this multiple parts based on what I read from here, and then taking what I've learned from myself about my interest in vampires and kind of tweaking for the next installment in this little series that I'm doing here, because there's so many vampire novels and different vampire medias in like movies, TV shows, books, and I feel like there's one out there that's perfect for me. I just have to find it, and this is kind of what this vlog is helping me do. So I'll definitely be starting with Carmilla and then reading Hungerstone and then one of these other ones to see from there what I'm feeling. But then I'll come back at the end of the vlog and talk about what I've learned about myself and about my enjoyment of vampires. Because right now I can't really tell you what I think about them other than I never really thought I enjoyed them. But clearly that's not the case because I've read two vampire novels that I've really enjoyed, especially Lucy Undying. That has like really stuck with me. And what has stuck with me from that is like the very unique vampire lore that was created there, because Lucy and some of the other vampires can like shapeshift. Lucy specifically turns herself into moonlight, which is not something that I've ever seen done before with vampires, and I really love that, and I just wanted to know more about that and more about how the vampires exist in the world and like what all of their different abilities are. And so I would love one of these novels to do something like that. And also I would love to see a vampire turn into a bat. Okay, I think it's fun, I think it's silly, I think that it has a time and place, and I'm hoping that one of these books has that. We'll see. But that's where we're at right now, where I know that there's vampire novels out there that I can like. I've just never gotten quite there. Like Lucy Undying, I really liked for the vampire aspects, but the plot itself kind of fell a little flat for me. So I know that one of these has to get us closer. So let's just get started with Carmilla and see what we find out. Hey. I know to you it doesn't seem like any time has passed, but for me it has been several days. I filmed that first clip on Tuesday. It is now Friday. I do have an update for you though. I did finish Carmilla, and unfortunately I did not get any clips of me reading it because I sat down and read the first 30 pages, put it down for a day, and then read it all again last night. So, don't have any clips of me reading, but I don't think it would have been super interesting to see anyway. I thought it was fine. I didn't really love it. I feel like it was a lot of telling and no showing. There was no atmosphere. There was nothing really happening here because it's written from the perspective of Laura, and so we have her, it's like diary entries kind of, and so she's like writing to us, the reader, and like that was fine at first, but then it starts to just kind of get to the point where they meet up with this other guy who had a similar vampiric encounter, and then it's just him recounting every little detail that happened to him to Laura, who's then retelling it to us. So it's just like not the most interesting. It's like we're just reading an account of what happened secondhand. So it's not like the most interesting. And then at the end there was like a little part where like they actually have to like take down the vampire, and like that was fine, but it didn't do anything for me really. Like I really wanted like a nice gothic atmosphere, and this did not do it because it's short. It's only 130-ish pages, and like I said, a lot of telling and not showing, and it's just like recounts of information. So I feel like there wasn't really a whole lot going on, and the story was kind of just fine. I feel like most of the story wasn't even Laura and Carmilla. It was this other guy and his niece and what happened to her. Not so much what was going on with Laura and Carmilla, which, like, that's what the first-ish is. And then after that, it was just this guy telling his story to Laura, who was then telling it to us. And, like, that was not the most enjoyable. And also, like I said, this edition has illustrations. And, like, this was one. And then from that chapter on, through all of this, let me get a good spot. There's no more illustrations. So, like, this whole section here, you can see the pages with the illustrations. There's quite a few. And then randomly, the biggest chunk of the book, where the most happens, no illustrations until the very end. Like, genuinely one of the last pages. So, like, that was also just really weird. And I feel like was also kind of telling of just, like, not that much was happening there. Because that's when we were just getting this guy recounting his experience. So, like, I thought it was fine. I see where the inspiration for Dracula came from and how this inspired so many other things, but I didn't love it. Like, I thought it was just okay. I'm glad to have read it, and I'm glad I read this edition specifically, because I really like the footnotes that the editor included and, like, her prologue, like, introduction thing. Really enjoyed that, and I really liked this cover. The story inside was kind of just okay. Yeah, so that makes me wonder if I would like Dracula more, if it has more atmosphere and kind of more going on, I guess better writing, potentially. Not sure about that. But then I did start reading Hungerstone, and I am already loving this so much. So this follows Lenore, and she is kind of in this loveless marriage to this, like, aristocrat type of guy. And so she sees her role as, like, needing to be the perfect wife and the perfect homemaker and, like, host these events and, like, keep the house in order and, like, do all of, like, the wifely duties. And then her husband decides to buy this land because he's always wanted to, like, have land to his name. And so he buys this, like, land in this, like, manor house out in the country. And so it starts with them, like, packing all their stuff up and, like, heading out there. And then on the way there, it was, like, raining, storm, very atmospheric. They see a carriage topple over and a girl is, like, trapped in the carriage, which is very similar to how Carmilla is introduced in this novel, in Carmilla as well. And I've decided the bat's name is Carmilla. But anyway, that's very similar to what happens in here. It just takes a little bit longer into the story for it to happen. And so I was expecting in this, just based on what I read in Carmilla, since this is based on that, they were going to get to this house and, like, get settled and then her carriage would show up. But no, it was, like, on their way there for the first time they met her and they've brought her in. And so I'm really enjoying this. Is very atmospheric. I'm loving the writing. Like, it is just so good. Just, like, the tension and, like, the foreboding vibes that are just, like, carrying through everything is, like, very, like, tense. And, like, it's clear that Lenore and her husband, whose name Henry, like, they don't really get along. There's, like, something in their past that's, like, being dredged up that Lenore isn't really super happy about. She doesn't really like that she's been moved here. She doesn't know if she's, like, able to handle everything that needs to go into this. And I'm only, I think, like, 40 pages in. Yeah. But I'm loving this so far. Like, it's just really giving the atmosphere that I wished Carmilla would have had. And this, as a Carmilla retelling, I think is going to do a very good job of that, because the synopsis is really very similar. So it says, it's the height of the Industrial Revolution, and 10 years into Lenore's marriage to steel magnate Henry, their relationship has soured. When Henry's ambitions take them from London to the remote British moorlands to host a hunting party, a shocking carriage accident brings the mysterious Carmilla into their lives. Carmilla, who is weak and pale during the day, but vibrant at night. Carmilla, who stirs up something deep within Lenore. And before long, girls from the local villages fall sick, consumed by a terrible hunger. As the day of the hunt draws closer, Lenore begins to unravel, questioning the role she has been playing all these years. Torn between regaining her husband's affection and the cravings Carmilla has awakened, Lenore will soon uncover darkness in her household that will place her at terrible risk. And so this just feels, it is a Carmilla retelling. Like, that is exactly what happens in Carmilla. However, just, like, with an older character, because in Carmilla, I think Laura is, like, 18 or 19. And then in here, obviously, this is, like, a grown woman, which she might not even be that much older, but she's, like, a wife and, like, is a little bit higher up in society, I guess. But I'm really enjoying it. The atmosphere is exactly what I was looking for. It has, like, that gothic moorlands, foggy, grassy, rainy vibe, and I'm really, really enjoying it so far. Like, I read those 40 pages in, like, 20 minutes. Like, I devoured those 40 pages, so I'm really excited to continue. And I'm disappointed in Carmilla. For some reason, I had it in my head that I was absolutely going to love this, and I just didn't. I don't know if classics are really for me, to be fair. And this, like, it was just very straightforward. Like, there just wasn't really anything going on, and it just, like, wasn't that good. That's really the most I can say about it, because, like, it just didn't really do anything for me. Because, again, I wanted, like, an atmosphere. I wanted a setting, and I just didn't really get that, because it was really just, like, everything was being told to me. There was no showing of anything. So I don't know if that's just, like, how the writing style was at the time, and if Dracula is then the same, or if Dracula kind of took this and said, no, we need more, and then did that more. Not sure, but yeah, thought it was just fine. I like the premise. I really like the illustrations. Carmilla was also just a crazy character. Like, her characterization was wild, and so I'm really looking forward to reading it from a woman author's perspective, and also just like with older characters and like in a more sapphic positive way. So really enjoying this so far. Again, only 40 pages in, but having a great time and really excited to continue, and hopefully you will see more of me actually reading this and not just finishing it. But again, this is so short and I wouldn't have had anything to say during it anyway, so it is what it is. But now you've been caught up. Weird construction going on out there. I can't tell what they're actually doing, but it's making a lot of noise. We're just gonna have to roll with it. Anyway, last night I did finish Hungerstone and I really love this. It's not a 5-star, but it's definitely like a high 4.5. I really love this. This did exactly what I wanted Carmilla to do. It gave Lenore, who was like the Laura character from Carmilla, so much more agency and just like so much more control over her life. And she's not a passive character anymore, because truly Carmilla was just like a retelling of the events that were happening in there. It was just not super engaging, I guess. And this did exactly what I wanted it to do. It was super atmospheric, and like the moors and like the foggy, wet, like moorland, but then also just like this crumbling, decrepit house that she's trying to restore, and her like failing marriage, but then also like the lust and seduction with Carmilla, and then also just like her finding what she hungers for and like satiating that hunger. It was really good. I really enjoyed this, and I can see why this wouldn't work for a lot of people, because it is not very vampire heavy at all. The word vampire is never used. We never really actually see Carmilla doing anything vampiric. Like, things are happening around them that's kind of like, ooh, what's going on there? And then Lenore kind of gets into a little something. But there's not really any like blood-sucking, fang out action. Like, that's not what this is. It is truly about like what is hunger and how do you satiate your hunger, and when and why do you allow yourself to hunger. And I really enjoyed that. In the acknowledgement, she says, I became interested in the idea of appetite in its most expansive sense, in the world of desire, and why it is that for so many of us it is a world fraught and tentative. And I just really enjoy this. It truly is more about like hunger and desire more than like actual vampires. So I'm hoping that with our next novel, we'll get more actual vampire lore happening, because this didn't really have that. This was kind of just like a slightly gory, like historical fiction, it kind of felt like. And in the vampire aspect, not really super heavy. In my enjoyment aspect, really good. I really had a very good time with this. It truly was just about like Carmilla opening Lenore's eyes and like waking her up to her life and realizing that like she has agency and she can take control of her life. And it was more about that than like the actual vampires. The vampires were just kind of like the plot device to get us there in a way. But I really enjoyed this. This was very much a like good for her, type novel, where Henry, her husband, is like a very awful person, and like you don't really see that at first, because like they kind of enter into this marriage knowing like they're not doing it for love, they're doing it to like help each other, because Henry comes from new money. So he's really wealthy, but he has no status. And Lenore has status but no money. So when they go into this marriage, they're like, okay, we're just going to benefit each other. Like, we're not doing this for love. We're not doing this for any reason other than you have what I need on both ends. But then it kind of becomes exhausting for both of them, because this is what Lenore has like taught herself to want, but like she doesn't really want it, and Henry does not want her as a wife. And so there's just like a lot happening in the marriage, while at the same time nothing is happening in the marriage. And then we have Lenore's friend Cora, who is significantly younger than her and has status and money. And so Henry's kind of like lusting after her. And so Lenore thinks there's something happening there that there might not actually be. And so there's just like a lot of layers to this story. And I just had a really good time just going through the story. I really feel like this is a good mix of like character and plot driven narrative, because this wouldn't exist without the characters, obviously. But I feel like the plot isn't like super big, I guess is a good way to explain it. However, I think as a Carmilla retelling, I want something that gives Carmilla more agency and like is from her perspective, because in both of the things that I've read, obviously Carmilla and now this, she is just kind of like there, and like she's clearly the one who's like causing these things to happen, but like we don't know what's going on with her. And so I would like that. And I will say, as a Carmilla retelling, this does a very good job. There's a lot of aspects from Carmilla in here that like as I was reading it, I was like, I could like pick them out. Like there's scenes in Carmilla where Laura in there wanders like into a churchyard and Carmilla's like, get out of this awful place, and that happens in here several times. At one point in Carmilla goes missing and like the whole household is looking for her, happens in here. So there's just like a lot of things that are very similar between the two. I much prefer this because again, it had the atmosphere and it had the agency in the characters, and it felt like I was being shown things and not just told them. So I really enjoyed this. And looking at the rating, it has a relatively high rating. I think it's like 3.9, but a lot of the top reviews are like relatively negative. And I think because if you market this as like a vampire horror, that's not what you're getting. And so I think when I had said, I actually don't know if that was in this video or a different video, but I had talked about Hungerstone and how to me, this isn't horror. This is like a historical fiction with like horror elements, and I think that is much more true to the story because like there are definitely like some gory kind of like horror elements, but it is not a horror novel in itself. The horror in here is just like existing as a woman during this time period and having no agency unless you take it for yourself, and in this case Carmilla is able to give her that agency because of her vampiric nature. So I really did enjoy this. However, for the next thing, I do want something like more true to vampires and like actually has more like vampire lore happening in it. So, and that was one of the things that I saw in the reviews for that, where they were like, there's no vampires in here. Like we see nothing about like people getting turned or like actually being a vampire. And like there's scenes where like people in like the village are like experiencing this like deep hunger, but we don't know if that's like as a result of them being bitten by a vampire or being like turned into a vampire. Like we have no clue what's happening there. And I think that's because this is not a story about vampires. It is a story about hunger and desire, using vampires as a way to illustrate that. So for my next book, I'm going to be reading Silver Under Nightfall because this is like a true vampire novel. Our main character appears to be a elite bounty hunter of rogue vampires, but there are rumors that he might be half vampire because his mother like ran off with a vampire. And then also there's like a terrifying new breed of vampires and he has to investigate. I'm not sure. This is very different and it's quite long, but I do have the audiobook, so I'm just excited to get a new take on vampires because I think that for me, when I read vampire novels, I wanted to do something different. I want it to like, I want the author to put their own spin on the genre and like the common creature of vampires. And so I'm really hoping that's what we get here, especially if there's like a new breed of vampires happening. I think that that could really do what I want it to do, because I found that like in a lot of the vampire things that like are like super popular, they're all kind of the same. Like they bite people's neck and they suck their blood. So I'm really curious to see if they have like new powers and different abilities like they did in Lucy Undying, where she could turn into moonlight. Like that is so cool and I want more of that. So I'm hoping that this is what that'll give me. So let's get started with this. Happy Halloween! If I had had more time to read for this video, it would be going up tomorrow, November 1st, the Saturday after Halloween, but this semester has really been kicking me down, okay? So this video is not going up for a little while after Halloween, but today, for me, it is Halloween. I meant to update you when I was halfway through Silver Under Nightfall, but now I have less than 100 pages left to go because I could not put this down. I am absolutely loving this. This is doing exactly, almost, with like one caveat, what I wanted a vampire novel to do. It is giving us like the different types of vampires and like different alliances and allegiances and like different groups that all like beef with each other in different ways and also kind of have like different abilities. I'm loving it. But this follows Remy, and he is a reaper, and reapers are vampire hunters pretty much, and his father is like a very well-known reaper, but now he's like older and like not really able to be a Reaper, so all of this like burden is falling on Remy, even though he doesn't really enjoy being a Reaper. It's just kind of something that was like thrust upon him, and he's just kind of like doing it now because like he doesn't have any other choice. He ends up discovering this new, what they think is a new like species of vampire, but is closer to like a zombie like mutation type thing that is like they can't kill it. And so he ends up having to partner with these two vampires who are engaged and are a lot like are trying to form an alliance with the humans to like try and figure this out. But the humans like are very prejudiced against the vampires like for good reasons. The vampires like hunt humans and then like turn them and like do all of these awful things to them. So like the humans have good reasons to dislike vampires and vampires have good reasons to dislike humans. But Remy and these other two vampires are kind of in the middle of that, where they can see the humanity in both and see how just because you're a vampire doesn't mean you're a bad person, and just because you're a human doesn't mean you're a good person. So there's a lot of conversations that are being had about like just because you're a human doesn't mean you're automatically good. Like you have bad humans too, so why do you automatically assume that all vampires are bad? So really liking that. But these two vampires are engaged and like they are in love with each other, but they also both have feelings for Remy. So we kind of get like a throuple situation happening. And when I picked this up, for some reason I really thought that this was a YA novel. It is not. This is a fully like adult fantasy, and I'm loving it. I don't know why I thought it was young adult. I think it's because I got it on one of those like buy one get one 50% off tables at Barnes & Noble, and like almost everything else on the table was YA, so not really my fault on thinking that, but I am loving this. Like I said, there are a lot of different types of vampires. So there's different vampire courts. There were 8 courts, but then a few of them got like completely decimated, so we're down to like just a few. And there's one, the first court, that is like run by like the Night Empress, and like they are like the big bad vampires that like no one wants to get involved with. But then we have our 2 main character vampires, the man who is a third court vampire, and he's like the king of the third court vampires, and then the woman who is like in charge of the fourth court vampires, and the fourth court is like really dwindling. And so we're seeing the like different traditions and customs of the different courts and like how they kind of work together sometimes but also like don't really get along, and so that's really interesting. But then we're also seeing how like the longer a vampire is alive, and like, well, the longer a vampire has been a vampire, they are stronger and like faster. And so we're seeing the vampire abilities of like speed and strength and durability, because Remy as a hunter is like training with the vampires to like try and like get better at being able to fight the ones that are against them. And so that's really interesting. And so what I'm really liking of the vampire aspects is just like how many vampires there really are, and just like seeing them use that like speed. And we're seeing people get bit and turned, but then also we're really learning about like how the vampires feed and like what different ways they can do that. And also because our 2 like main vampires have kind of like different abilities that like a lot of other vampires don't have, so like they're quite special in themselves, and so we're learning about that. And now the caveat, I said I want to see a vampire turn into a bat. Is that like not a common thing? Is that like not a thing that happens in vampire media? I really think that Lucy Undying was like my perfect, in the vampire aspects of the plot, it was perfect, because like Lucy could shift into moonlight or mist, and like pretty much all the vampires could like shift into different animals. Like that was super cool. I really like the vampire aspects. I didn't love what was happening like outside of that plot. There was some weird like pyramid scheme things happening, but like this I am really enjoying. I just wish we were seeing more of like the abilities of vampires, like turning into a bat. But now I'm questioning if I only think that that's a thing that happens because of the Hotel Transylvania movies. Because like I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know of any other vampire media that shows them turning into bats other than Hotel Transylvania. So maybe that is an unjust expectation on my end, but this is like exactly what I wanted from vampires. It's like hot and steamy, has like the romance going on where like because they're vampires they've got some crazy stamina, but they're also kind of like biting each other like for the pleasure of it. And then also we're seeing them like with their strength and speed and durability, like you see in a lot of like traditional vampire media. So I feel like this is really doing like exactly what I wanted it to do, while also being like so full of like political intrigue and like court drama, because it's like we have the queen of Aluria, which is like this kingdom that they're in, but then also the rulers of all the different vampire courts, and like how some of them are trying to work together to form alliances and some are just trying to like kill everyone. So I'm just really enjoying everything that's happening in here. And also I really enjoyed it because we meet the woman of the vampire duo first, and there's kind of like a little something between her and Remy, and we're like, oh, okay. And then we meet the guy second, and there's something between them too, and you're like, oh, are we gonna like have something here? And then we do, but it kind of is, I don't want to say it's a slow burn because like that's not true, but it definitely takes a little bit to like get up to Remy being like, yes, this is something that I want. And so then those scenes were like, oh my goodness, like I had to pause and had me gagged, okay? And so I'm really, really enjoying this. And like I said, I have less than 100 pages left. And I know that there's a sequel. I don't know if it is going to be more than that or if it's just the sequel. The next one is The Court of Wanderers, and I'm really excited. I also really like this cover. I'm assuming that this is Remy, and like there's this castle down here, but it's also reflected in his eye. Really enjoying this. So I'm having a really great time with this, and I just can't wait to keep reading because I know that we're not going to get everything wrapped up in here. Like, even if I didn't know there was a sequel, I'd be thinking, oh, there has to be a sequel, because we still don't know like what's causing the rot, is like the mutation that is happening in all of these people. We don't know who's causing it, because we know someone's behind it, we just don't know who. We don't know how to stop it. We don't know like this first court vampire situation. They're out there somewhere and they're going to become a bigger part of the story, but like, again, there's only like 100 pages left. We're not solving all of that in here. So I know that I'm not going to get any like solid conclusions, but I'm just really excited to keep reading because, again, this is like exactly what I want from a vampire novel. So I'm having a great time. And I feel like I could actually end the video after this book because I feel like Carmilla is like a classic vampire situation, and then Hungerstone, a retelling of that. And it like had vampires, but I was thinking about it and I was like, the vampires are kind of just like a vessel to like tell the story. Like you could take the vampires out and replace it with like any kind of like romantic or lustful situation. The vampires aren't really like pertinent to the story. They help move the story along, and as a Carmilla retelling, they have to be there kind of, but it's not like a vampire story. It's a story about desire, and the vampires are just like helping to tell that story, where this story would not exist without the vampires. So I feel like from here, I want to see a vampire turn into a bat, and I just don't think I'm going to get that. I don't think that's really going to happen because I have A Dowry of Blood and Woman Eating, and I feel like those are going to be similar to Hungerstone, where vampires are like heavily involved, but it's more about like the lives of the women. And I know especially Woman Eating is going to be like that because it's not really about her being a vampire. It's about her life, because it's more like literary fiction, I feel like. So Dowry of Blood, and then what's the other one? This Ravenous Fate, which I do really want to read, but I'm thinking that I might make a part 2 to this video because I also then just went to the library yesterday and checked out Zom Rom-Com, which does not look like a vampire novel, but this takes place during a zombie apocalypse, and this girl Eddie is like trying to survive, and then she like tries to rescue her neighbor, but her neighbor is a vampire. So, you know, this is also something I could read, and I think this would touch on more of like the romantic aspect, because like when you think about vampire media, your mind is probably immediately going to go to like Dracula, Twilight, Vampire Diaries, like those things, and like they're much more like romantically driven, like, and like yes, they have like the more like action drama aspect, but like they're like rooted in romance, and so I feel like this might be something good for that. But I'm just gonna finish this and then we'll decide if I'm still in the mood for vampires from there. And I feel like because vampires can be done in like so many ways, that's what's keeping me interested. But at the same time, I feel like I don't want to say I'm getting like burnt out on vampires, but it's like they're just not keeping me gripped. I really do think that I am more of like a werewolf girl than a vampire girl. I just think werewolves are cooler. And I think that that harkens back to the point that I want to see the vampires turn into bats. I want to see the humans turn into wolves too. Like I like the like transition shape shifting of it all. So I do think that even after all of this, I'm just like, I can read vampire novels and enjoy them, but I do still think that I prefer werewolves. I just think they're cooler. I do, okay? And I feel like vampires and werewolves have a lot in common, like strength, speed, durability. Like all of like the key features of both are shared. And then it's just kind of like their weaknesses and then like what the actual creature is. Right? And that's another thing I'm really enjoying about this. We're seeing the vampires getting staked, but they don't like silver, which I thought was just like a werewolf thing. Like the silver bullets. Not really sure, but another shared point. So I feel like you can like both for sure because they're so similar, but I definitely prefer werewolves for sure. So maybe we'll have to do a werewolf vlog, but we're getting completely sidetracked now. I tried to look for werewolf books, and so many of them are just like pure like erotica. And I don't have a problem with that, but I would like to read a book like this that is like more fantasy or like literary fiction leaning, but has to do with werewolves. I feel like anything with werewolves is usually like pure smutty romance or horror, which I don't have a problem with. I'm still enjoying the werewolf representation, but I wish that we had more. Right. So, and I think that's why I prefer werewolves too, is because there's so many instances of vampires in media, but werewolves just kind of get left out. Like even in Twilight, we never pick the werewolf, and they kind of turn him into a freak by imprinting on Renesmee. So werewolf hate will not be tolerated here. So if you have any recommendations for werewolf media, movies, books, shows, anything, I love werewolves. I think they're so cool. One of my favorite Halloween movies that I honestly watch all year long and will be watching tonight, at least going to be trying to because I don't think it's on a streaming service that we have, is The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. It has Victoria Justice in it, and it's like a cheesy like Nickelodeon movie, but it's so good. I love that movie. So I really just am a werewolf girly. I think this is making me realize that, because it's like, as much as I'm enjoying vampires, I'm not like, oh, that's really cool. I'm just like, yeah. So this vlog is doing for me what I wanted it to do, which was to get me to know more vampire media and just like see what other authors and like less popular vampire media is doing. And I'm enjoying it, right? But I'm not like, oh, I'm really liking the vampire specific aspect of this. Where if it was werewolves, I think I'd be all over it, you know? So I do think that I'll do a part 2 of my vampire reading vlog to read the other things, just because I feel like I'm feeling a little burnt out on vampires already, where it's just like, I'm just not a vampire lover. I'm not, okay? So I do think there'll be a part 2, and I think this will be the last book of this vlog. So then 3 in this vlog, and then 3 or 4 in the next vlog. So come back for part 2 of this vampire vlog, and then we'll eventually try and find enough books to do a werewolf reading vlog. But for now, I need to finish this. I have finished Silver Under Nightfall, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know if I'm gonna read the sequel. Not because I didn't enjoy this. This was like solid 4 stars. I really did enjoy it. I just feel like I don't know how invested I am in the actual plot of what's going on. Like, I just don't know that I care enough to read a whole nother novel. Let's look and see how long the sequel is and if there's more coming after that. Okay, the sequel, Court of Wanderers, came out in 2024. And it doesn't look like there's anything at least announced for coming out after that. And it has a significantly lower rating than the first book. And an uglier cover. The very first review here gave it 2 stars. I do not know what to say, but to get the main point out of the way quickly, I don't know that I've ever experienced such a steep decline in quality from a first book to its sequel. Yeah, that's not promising. Okay, so there's like no positive reviews. They're all saying the first one should have just been a standalone. This is like a terribly done sequel. Got it. Okay, so I don't think I'll be continuing. Now, that's not to say that I will never pick another one. Like, I don't own the second one, so it's not like a top of mind thing anyway. But the way it ended, like, it's definitely setting up for more. Like, there are very few, if any, actual conclusions that occur. Like, it's mostly just kind of solving some, like, the rot. We've understood where that came from, and we've kind of like dealt with that, but now we're dealing with like the first court vampires and like everything going on there. So that stands to reason then that the second book would have more vampires in it, but I just don't know that I care, because now thinking about it, outside of like the main like 3 or 4 vampires that we have in here, like as like main characters, the rest of the vampires are just like faceless, characterless, expressionless, just like blobs. They don't really add much to the story, you know? I feel like they could even just serve as just like regular people. Like, they don't even technically have anything going on that like makes them feel more threatening than just like a regular soldier. So I don't know. I really like the main characters are done well. Everyone else, So it feels like there was like an army of vampires coming at us, but it never felt threatening. It was just kind of like, well, if we're getting through them so quickly, then like, does it really matter if they're vampires? Right? Like, we were never worried about like getting bitten by them. It was just like, we're killing them all. So the like stakes weren't really super high, especially because once you know there's a sequel, you know that at least the main character is going to survive. And so it's just kind of like, I don't really feel the need to pick up the sequel. So 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I had a very good time with it, but especially like towards the end, I started to be like, I don't really care. Like, it's fine. I'm enjoying it, but I feel like the first like 75 even percent, I was like really into it. And then after that, I was just like, I don't really care what's gonna happen next, which is not something that you want to be happening in a book. And I think it's because once the characters got together and like started like communicating and like actually expressing their feelings, then it was like, well, now we know there has to be like some kind of other issue that's going to occur. And then it just kind of went downhill from there. So I did enjoy it. I don't think I'll pick up the sequel just because I don't really have any desire or interest to do so. And like, I can kind of see like from here what the sequel's going to have in store. And I don't think it's something that I'm really going to love, especially based on all of the reviews that I just read. So 4 stars, will not be continuing. But I have decided that I'm going to continue this vlog because there's no way I can get it up tomorrow. I would love to get this posted like as close to Halloween as possible, but also like vampires are not just like a seasonal thing. Like you can read them anytime. Vampire books come out all year long. So I am just going to keep reading because I have a lot more vampire novels that I'm interested in, and I feel like I need something to like redeem after this. So I think I am actually going to read this Ravenous Fate next because I need better. I need better. And I know that that one is also in a series, and I think the second book just came out. So that's where I'm going to go next and hope that it does a little bit more for me. And like I said, when I first gave you my like midpoint-ish thoughts, I was really enjoying this and having a very good time. And from there, just things kind of dwindled because it's like a lot was happening and the stakes should have been high, but they just weren't. And like bad things were happening, but everyone was just always fine. Like no one was getting hurt. Nothing bad was happening to them. And like they were being put in these like high intensity situations, but I never felt it. So I don't know. I think this is only the first or second book that I read from this author. So maybe their writing just doesn't really work for me. I'm not sure, but kind of disappointed honestly, because like up until that last like 100 pages that I just read, I was having a great time. And then the last 100 pages, I was just kind of like, meh. Like, I don't really care anymore, which is crazy because it's like the last 100 pages, especially leading into a sequel, that should be like ramping it up, like amping it up, making your readers want to pick up your sequel. And this did not do that. So that's that on that. But now I'm going to read one more thing. So 4 books in this vlog to hope that we end on a more positive note because that was honestly really disappointing. So I guess catch me here again later to be starting This Ravenous Fate. Change of plans. I am actually not going to be This Ravenous Fate because when I picked it up and read the synopsis of this, I realized that it sounds incredibly similar to Silver Under Nightfall, to the point where even the term Reaper is used, just in a completely different context. So in Silver Under Nightfall, Reapers are the people who hunt the vampires, and in This Ravenous Fate, Reapers are a type of vampire. And this also follows a vampire hunter and other vampire hunters. So I was like, I don't know that I want to read these 2 back to back. And also, I had set this down by my chair and like I sat down and I was like, I don't want to read this. So I was looking at the other stack of vampire novels and I was like, I don't want to read any of those. So I kind of felt like I was back kind of to where I started in the I don't know that vampires are for me stage and mentality, because I was like, none of these have really done it for me. Like I really enjoyed Hungerstone for like the imagery and like the gothicness of it all, but there was like very few vampire elements in there. And then Silver Under Nightfall I enjoyed, and as I've gotten farther away from finishing it, my enjoyment has gone down. Like I think honestly at this point it's probably closer to like a 3.5, 3-star rather than the 4 I had originally given it. So I kind of just felt myself being like, maybe I was right, maybe I don't really like vampires. And I didn't want to then force myself to keep reading just to kind of prove myself wrong, because I just know that I'd be reading it and be like not having the time of my life being like, well, I knew I was right. So I ended up not picking up This Ravenous Fate. However, I did watch the entire first season of Interview with the Vampire, the AMC version, and oh my god, I loved it. So that kind of made me question if maybe vampires just work better for me in a visual medium, because I flew through all 7 of those episodes, had like the time of my life watching it, really loved it. And so I'm wondering if vampires for me just work better visually and like in movies and TV shows. So something for me to ponder and continue to watch that, because I'm now going to be binging the 2nd season because I really love that. I had a very good time with it. And also that has queer vampires, just 2 men. And I really loved it. And just like the way the vampiricism of it all was explored and just like the different abilities that those vampires had. I think that there's a lot that authors and writers can do with vampires to like still have them be very clearly identifiable as vampires, but kind of like make them their own and like do different things visually, like the way that the vampire's eyes change in Interview with the Vampire versus like something like Vampire Diaries where they have like the veins that come out of their eyes. I think there's a lot that can be done there to like make it your own, and I think I just haven't found the one that really resonates with me yet, because while I'm having a great time with the show, it's very entertaining, I'm really like sucked into it, I don't think it's quite exactly what I'm looking for. However, having said that, and having read these 3 vampire novels and watched that whole season of TV, I think I've come to realize that the things that I really want in vampires kind of fall on 2 different ends of the spectrum. On one side, I want like a really emotional character study of just like being this creature and like having all of these different needs and desires and not really knowing how to navigate that, but then also being immortal and seeing like the whole world change and like pass you by almost, and like that more emotional introspective end of it. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I want just like a hot, sexy, fun vampire romance. And I think that a lot of the things I read fall somewhere on the spectrum, but don't quite land on the two ends of what I'm exactly looking for. And I don't know if what I'm exactly looking for even exists. However, like that's what I want. I want like a vampire like trapped in time, who's like seeing the world pass them by and just feeling so lost and out of place and feeling like a monster and not understanding themselves and trying to like find themselves. But at the same time, every time they get close, the world changes so drastically. And just like, I want to see the passing of time from an immortal creature's perspective. And then on the other hand, I want like a fun mate bond, let me bite you in a hot, sexy way over here. So like I said, I think the things that I read fall somewhere in there, and I think the things I still have left to read will also fall somewhere on the spectrum. And maybe with things like Woman Eating and Dowry of Blood, we'll get a little bit closer to this end. But I think I am going to do a part 2 of this vlog, and I'm going to find some other options potentially that kind of fit more what I'm looking for and will potentially increase my enjoyment of vampires. So in the next vlog, I think I'll definitely be reading Woman Eating, because I think that this one has really high potential to fit on this end of the spectrum of things I'm looking for and just be like a character exploration of a woman finding her place as a vampire and like figuring out what it means to be this creature. I think this might do that. However, I don't know that A Dowry of Blood and This Ravenous Fate are really going to fit exactly where I want them to, but there will be a part 2 to this vlog, and I will find my perfect vampire novel. If it takes me years to do it, I will find it, because I know it's out there. I know it is. I just have to spend more time finding it, because these are all things that the plot sound interesting, but not necessarily for the vampire aspects. So like This Ravenous Fate was exciting to me because it's sapphic, set in the 1920s. That to me is all I needed to know to be excited. The vampires are just kind of like an added bonus. I'm like, I might enjoy it. I might just feel meh about it. Woman Eating, I love a character exploration. I just love existing with a character and seeing them grow or potentially not grow and just kind of be messy. And that was enough to get me interested in this. Her being a vampire just kind of like an added bonus to that. A Dowry of Blood, I've just heard a lot of good things about this. I got it at like the grand opening of a local bookstore and I was like, sure, I'll get it. So this one I feel like is probably going to be somewhere in the middle. I feel like it's not quite either of these two things. I think this is the one that I have like the least expectations for because I don't anticipate really enjoying this. So in the next installment of this series, because I do kind of want to make this like a creature feature type series that I have going on. So I think in the next installment, I'm going to read Woman Eating because I think that really fits over here, but I also want to find like a fun, hot, sexy vampire romance that I think might really kind of give me that like giggly, fun feeling on that end of the spectrum. And then maybe something that's more in the middle. So I have plans moving forward, although as of right now, I still think that vampires are kind of just okay. I don't know if it's because they're kind of like overplayed and I feel like no one is just giving them the oomph that they need, right? I need to see them being like dangerous and sexy and seductive while also being super introspective. And I just don't know that that is being done. And like, I'm sure it is. I'm just not familiar with it. So it is now my mission to find that because I'm sure it's out there. I'm just not familiar with it right now. And I know that that would be like my perfect vampire novel, right? So I know it exists. I know it's out there. I just need to do the work to find it. And now that I know what I'm looking for emotional, introspective, worlds passing you by, but also like a fun, sexy, seductive time. And I don't know if those two things really combine together. So it might end up being like two separate novels that do those two things. I just don't know yet. So I will be back and I will be trying again because I know it's out there. I know that I have the chance to really love vampires. I just need to try a bit harder to find it. So unfortunately, this vlog did not really bring us any closer, did not bring me any closer to loving vampires, but it did bring me closer to understanding what I potentially love about vampires. So I would say, while this wasn't a like roaring success, it was still successful in certain ways. However, like I said, I do kind of want to make this like a creature feature series, and I would love to do one on werewolves because while I have this like preset notion in my head that I don't love vampires, I have a preset notion that I love werewolves. And I don't know that I've ever read a book with werewolves. So again, I could be completely wrong. So we'll do another vampire vlog to hopefully find what I love. And then we'll do werewolves to see if I do actually love them or if I just think I do because I didn't love vampires and like that was like the only other option at the time. So we have a lot to sink our teeth into, if you will. But thank you so much for watching. If you have a favorite vampire novel, even if you don't think it fits exactly what I'm looking for, I just want to know, what are other people enjoying with vampires? Like, why do you love vampires? Why do you even dislike them? Why do you dislike them? I would love to know because, again, I have a lot of thoughts about vampires now. So I would just love to hear your recommendations, your favorite vampire novels, movies, TV shows, whatever. I'm here for it, okay? I'm having a lot of fun with this, and even though by the end I was kind of like burnt out on vampires and did not want to read anymore, I'm still having a lot of fun with it, and I will definitely go back to vampires at some point. Don't know when that'll be, but it will be happening. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming with me on this journey of finding my love for vampires. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in another video again soon. Bye.